get a,
Yep.
you got that?
Got it.
All right. So you press it and, okay. All right, so we're recording. Okay, hello out there in YouTube land. With you today, Scott Watson again with the Diner Talks. Our second guest in this series is Mr. Richard Evanoff. He's American and he's presently a long time living in Japan. I'm going to let him introduce himself so I don't get anything wrong. Okay, so Richard, nice to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you, Scott.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little something about yourself?
Yeah, well, as you said, I was born in the United States, and I studied philosophy while I was there, and sort of became disillusioned with Western philosophy and got interested in Asian philosophy. And I started studying Indian philosophy first, and then Chinese and Southeast Asian Buddhist philosophy, and eventually started to study Japanese philosophy and got into Zen Buddhism and other aspects of Japanese culture really fascinated me. And this was
Well,
all when
excuse me, what was it that got you into I mean, was anything particular when you were young that made you? I mean, like back when I was in college, for example, philosophy in the university curriculum was on decline, as was
yeah,
actually
yeah, 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 yeah.
English and British and American literature was on decline.
Me
Everybody
too.
to computer language and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
what was it that got you into that?
Well, when I was a high school student, we had like a free period where we could do anything that we wanted to do, and most of the students that go out to the to the playground and play sports, or they'd stay inside the student cafeteria and chat with each other. But for me, I always went to the library.
Uh-huh.
And by the way, that's where I got interested in music too, because they had these old collections of folk songs, people like Leadbelly and Woody Guthrie. And then that kind of stimulated my interest in music, because I was learning how to play guitar at the same time. But another thing that I did was, I read some books, and the very first book of philosophy I read was a book called Philosophies Men Live By. Yeah, the gender problem, but that was the title of the book. And it just fascinated me because they start off with like hedonism, the idea that pleasure is the greatest good in life. And then, you think, yeah, I really agree with that. But then the next chapter would be something like, we have to think about it first, and just the whole book progressed. And it was just like a real experience of widening my mind. And the second book I read was called The Art of Deception. And it was a great title for a book on informal logic.
Okay.
Yeah, which was, and the way that it was written was really clever, because, they say, here's how you can deceive people. But the real purpose of the book was to show you how to prevent yourself from being deceived. And those two books, I think they had a major influence on me. And then I was in the library, I'd sit down, I'd try to write out my own philosophy.
Okay. Let me ask, do you see any connection in being in that library as you were? Is there any connection you'd like to make between music and philosophy?
Music and philosophy, yeah. Well, I mean, there are philosophers who have written about music, and Schopenhauer, he said that music is the purest form of art because it doesn't represent anything. And I've always thought that that's kind of true. So for me, music is a completely different experience. I mean, philosophy is definitely your thinking. You've got the ideas up here in your brain, and music is just something you experience. But that in itself, I mean, that is kind of the Zen idea too. I think that we don't try to over conceptualize and be trying to filter everything through our thoughts, but rather we try to experience things directly. And that's one thing.
How then, for example, one piece of music, is appreciated by a certain person, but not appreciated by another. And then they have a whole system of values that they dump on music. And how is that possible if it's only about experience?
Well, Nishida Kitaro is one of the philosophers that I studied, when I was a student still in the United States, and one of the guys who interested me in Japan, along with D.T. Suzuki.
Okay.
They were two.
Excuse me, for our people who aren't familiar with like D.T. Suzuki, could you explain a little bit like who he is? I mean, for us, everybody knows him here,
Yeah, yeah.
but there are people, viewers, who might not know who he is. But could you
Well,
just give us a little?
D.T. Suzuki, Daisetsu Suzuki, he was a Japanese scholar of Buddhism and also a philosopher. And he was basically back in the, I don't know, the 40s and the 50s. He basically wrote a series of books that introduced Buddhism to the West after the Second World War. And Nishida Kitaro was a member of the Kyoto School, which back in the 1920s of Japanese philosophy, but he was also influenced by Buddhism. Both of them, by the way, are from Ishikawa Prefecture in Japan,
Uh-huh.
and they have museums there that I've taken my students to.
Oh, okay.
And they're really, Kanazawa City, right? And Ishikawa Prefecture is my favorite city in Japan.
Kanazawa.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's where
Yeah,
the
I've been there.
museums
It's
are
a nice
located.
place. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So is it safe to say that like books written, in English and so by D.T. Suzuki were read by what we call the beat poets, like
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Along with R.H. Blythe, he's the one that translated I don't know, 6 volumes of haiku poetry. I read that when I was, well, actually, I think I read most of it after I came to Japan, but I started to read it along
Okay.
with Kenneth Rexroth's translations of the Manyoshu.
Okay.
And all of the I read everything. I read Donald Keene and ancient Japanese literature, and I read contemporary novelists
Okay.
but just Japan really fascinated me. So that was the reason why I wanted to come.
All right. So you say you're from America. So I was wanting to ask you, right? I read some years back, about different words, vocabulary that are used, and one of them is expat.
Yeah, yeah.
Why? And which do you consider yourself an immigrant? I mean, how long have you lived in Japan? For 40 some years or something?
No, I came in 1980, so added up, it's this year will be what,
Yeah,
43, I
43
guess.
years.
Yeah,
Yeah. So do
yeah.
you consider yourself like an expat or an immigrant or what? Are you still an American citizen?
Yeah, I'm still an American citizen. I still have to pay taxes, and that's my biggest gripe.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
eventually they'll get around to residency-based taxation.
I hope so.
We'll be dead by then, but yeah.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, but I mean, how do I consider myself? I mean, maybe in terms of identity, I really don't think of myself as having a strong American identity. I don't have any identity. I try to take what I think is good from my American culture, my American background, take what's good from my Japanese background and culture, and try to combine the two in my own way of thinking and in my own life. But in terms of having a strong identity, I don't really have a strong identity as any kind of nationality. I couldn't identify
Okay.
in
All
terms
right.
of nationality.
Okay. Yeah. And you say you're from America, so where particularly are you from in America? I
Yeah,
have this photo.
oh, you
Uh,
got a photo. Okay.
is
Well,
this where
that's my house. That's where I grew up,
and
right?
where is his house?
Yeah, that's in Massillon, Ohio.
Massillon, Ohio.
Massillon, Ohio, right?
Okay. And what sort of place is that? I mean,
It's a
is
small
it
town of about 30,000 people. My dad worked in Cleveland,
in Cleveland?
so that's a major city, but he had to commute, and it's about an hour away by car.
Really? So your
But
dad commuted an hour back and forth, right?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, 1 hour each way, right?
uh,
Yeah, yeah.
okay,
By the
great.
way, Ohio is famous for philosophers too. I mean, Willard Van Orman Quine was one of the major philosophers from Ohio, and also Thomas Kuhn.
Thomas Kuhn, I know the
Yeah,
structure of scientific revolutions. Is that
right. That's
yeah?
the
The
structure
other
of
guy,
scientific
once more, who
revolutions.
was the first guy you mentioned?
Willard Van Orman Quine.
Don't think I've heard of him.
Quine, right,
Yeah.
right.
What
Yeah.
was he? What was he into?
Well, he's basically
Kind of
he
philosophy.
made the transition away from positivism to what is called post-positivism. So,
Positivism.
yeah, the idea of the old way of thinking was that language somehow represents the world, and he shifted that towards a perspective that language is something that's going on in the mind, and
Right. Okay.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
Right.
it's it's, I could get into it,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
We don't want to, and
yeah.
so, where are you presently in Japan? You're in. I know, but our audience doesn't know. But
Yeah,
so
well, I'm in Tokyo, and I live in Hachioji,
okay.
um, which is on the western edge of Tokyo. And when I first came to Japan, I really did not want to live in um, Tokyo. Just prior to that, I lived in Chicago in the United States, and I didn't want to live in a big city. I wanted to go to Hokkaido or someplace, out in the countryside.
Right.
But you can't find a job there, and that's one of the big problems. So,
Yeah.
or it's difficult to find jobs, if you're out away from the major urban areas. And I had a friend living in Tokyo. So I ended up, coming to Tokyo. My friend helped me to get my first job, which was teaching English to children.
Uh-huh.
And I spent the first year teaching English to children before I made connections to be able to get my first university part-time position.
Okay.
And
So you're presently teaching at a university, and
yeah. Right now I'm teaching at Aoyama Gakuen
oh yeah, I'm a
University
Queen.
in Shibuya in Tokyo,
Okay.
and it's been a progression because I've taught at other universities, prior to this, and I started at Aoyama in 1989, so I don't know, I've
Oh
been there
really?
how many years? Yeah,
Huh.
yeah. But where I live, it's interesting because I live in Hachioji, and this is on the western side of Tokyo, and I live on a mountainside.
All
And
right.
when I look, one direction, towards the east, I can see, Tokyo. And when I
Okay.
look the other direction towards the west, I can see all the mountains that go back towards Mount Fuji. So
Oh
I
wow.
feel I
Uh-huh.
feel that I found a place that is the best of both worlds. I'm close to the mountains and I'm close to the city.
Wow, sounds good. And what is it you're teaching at Aoyama Gakuen? Gakuen would be, what would that mean in English? Would there's for
Yeah,
our
Gakuen would probably be translated comprehensive. And
comprehension?
Aoyama Gakuen, it includes the whole educational system, and it goes all the way from kindergarten up to postdoc.
Okay.
So you've got the kindergarten, the elementary, junior high school, senior high school, university, graduate school.
And
And
is this a liberal arts college, or what would you call it? So,
yeah. I mean, well, in Japan, well, university is comprehensive, so they've got everything.
yeah.
Liberal arts is kind of a more recent term, though, but because I mean, one of the problems is they're divided into specific departments, and each department kind of focuses on their own thing. So I
Right.
really feel students kind of lack that kind of liberal background that is popular in
Okay.
the United States.
I have this photo here.
That's us.
Are your students, right?
Yeah,
This would be
that's
what a seminar class, or
yeah. This is our seminar, and that's me with short hair, and this is in my dining room.
okay. So you have this kind of casual, familiar relationship with your students, right? So kind of
Oh yeah. And
house
we
party type stuff, right? Right.
we
Okay,
do.
that's very nice. Yeah, yeah. And they're what? They're ready. They're what? Fourth year students, right? So seminar, right? Yeah.
Well, these are third and fourth year
Or third
students.
and fourth year. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. And I see your little doggy there. And
Yeah. Unfortunately, the dog died just last month.
oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry to hear
Unfortunately,
that.
that's
Yeah.
Mocha. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, our cat is, probably on her last legs. Of course,
Uh,
they say cats have 9 lives, so who knows? But yeah. So what is it that you teach?
so basically, I'm teaching in the the School of International Politics, Economics, and Communication, and I'm in the communication section. So I teach mainly intercultural communication.
Right,
And within that, I focus on, because my background's in philosophy,
right.
I focus on intercultural ethics, which is basically how people from different cultures learn how to get along together
Okay.
with each other, despite the fact that they have different ways of thinking. And I
Uh,
apply that then to environmental ethics too. And I've been pretty active both as a scholar in environmental ethics and also as an activist, because I've been involved with various kinds of NGOs and other groups that are working on environmental
yeah,
activity. Oh, you
I see you mentioned
found a copy of that.
environmental ethics, and I know you have a book out, and
Yeah, well,
it's kind of from my eyes, old eyes, but bioregionalism and global ethics.
yeah, and
Uh,
the subtitle, if you can't read it, is a transactional approach to um,
yeah.
uh, achieving ecological sustainability, social justice, and human well-being.
Okay. What a transactional approach now for a non-academic that might be kind of hard to wrap your head around. But what does that mean in layman's terms?
Well, basically, when we think about the relationship between humans and nature, we tend to separate the two and say humans are on one side and nature's on the other. But transactional means that, right? Humans are part of the environment, and the environment is part of humans. You can't make
Right.
a strong distinction between the two. I mean, obviously, we breathe air, we eat food, we drink water, all of them, we evolve
Right. Right.
through the environment. And so we can't, set nature on one side and humans on the other and put them into opposition with each other. We have to see
Right.
how they're related, and that relationship we can speak of as being transactional. It's not simply an interaction; it's a transaction.
All right. Yeah, I think it was I forget who it was, one of the American poets, maybe connected with Beat, was it Gary Snyder or Philip
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
who made a point that yeah, as you said, that we tend to separate nature from human, but he brought out the point that the hair on his knuckles, that's nature, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Ourselves
yeah.
and our nature,
It
but
is right, 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 right.
yeah,
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 it's interesting that you mentioned Gary Snyder because he was one of the key figures in bioregionalism, which is what I wrote the book about. And bioregionalism is basically the idea of trying to harmonize human culture, right, and humans with their local environments.
wow,
And Gary Snyder, as you may know, he came to Japan and he was a poet. He went back, he won the Pulitzer Prize for his book called Turtle Island.
right,
And if you read that book, I mean, just the ideas that he's got there are bioregional ideas. How do we reconcile humans with the environment? And then later, his later poetry and later collections of essays, he developed this idea further. And he's considered to be one of the key figures in bioregionalism, along with Peter Burke
okay.
and Raymond Dasman, who are the two who actually coined the phrase and got it started. But Gary Snyder's been definitely involved with that.
Well, and you mentioned Gary and bioregional with him, and brought up this Yamal Sansei, who was a friend of with Snyder. They
Yeah.
went hiking together in one of the mountains of Nara
Mm.
on one of Snyder's trips to Japan. And he, as you know, I translated some of his work, and he lived down in he at the end of his life down in Yakushima.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think they had some kind of commune down there, didn't they?
Yeah,
Along with
yeah. Well,
the
that commune with Sasaki Nara, that was off on an island
yeah,
off Kyushu, but
yeah, yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
was there with himself. And because I went down to meet him. I wanted to go down to meet him, but he had died that summer. So I went anyway and met his wife,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
it was a very, very, a farmhouse actually, right? And he had and then across the road, this dirt road, he had another what used to be a farmhouse too, but the floor was gone. It stretched over a river. So he was writing. This was his writing. Right below him was this river flowing by.
That's great. That's
Yeah, yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And
Gary Snyder, he's been to Tokyo, a few times to do readings. So I've heard it. I've gone to his readings. I've met him. I've shook his hand.
mm,
And Nanao Sakaki often reads with him, so I've met him too. And actually, I went hiking one time with Nanao. I belong to this NGO, Friends of the Earth, and they got a request, to go to lead a hike. So I led a hike for Nanao and some of the other people that were accompanying him.
right. Yeah. Okay. So, and could you talk about some of your other activities? Like you mentioned Friends of the Earth, and I was surprised when you had mentioned that in an email, and you used the initials FOA, and I was like, why is it called faux when it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but it's kind of an interesting.
Yeah, everybody comments on that. Friends of the Earth, right? It's an international NGO that started in England, and then it was
Hmm,
opened here in Japan by a guy named Jonathan Holloman.
okay.
And I got acquainted with him, I don't know, back in the 1980s sometime, and then found out about their hikes. And I've always been interested in hiking.
Mhm.
So I joined the hikes, and then eventually I volunteered as a hike leader for them.
Okay.
And I continued all the way up until about 3 years ago, and I've got arthritis now.
Oh,
And I have a hard time with my knees, and I'm basically okay in everyday life. But if I'm going down a mountain, I have a lot of trouble. So I'm not doing any hike leading anymore. But
uh-huh.
that's one of the NGOs I was involved with.
Okay, now I have a picture of you.
Ah, there we are. That's me, believe it or not. On the right. Yeah, not the
I
guy on the
assume you're on
left.
it, right? And I wanted to ask you. I mean, what is is there a connection of your being an Eagle Scout and your concern about nature, environmental things, and hiking and so forth? Because I know
Yeah,
like scouts
yeah,
is hiking every place, but
yeah.
yeah,
Well, when
that
I was the other person in the photo there was my grandfather, not my father.
oh
And when I was high school, well, I don't know, 12 or 13 years old or so, I got interested in going out camping, but my dad would never take me. So I got involved with the Boy Scouts. And as it turned out, my grandfather was also one of the scout leaders.
okay.
And and then, that I think gave me a deep appreciation for nature, being in Boy Scouts. But it wasn't until after I'd come to Japan, I can't remember what the year exactly, but maybe like around 1990 or so. Um, I was at Nojiriko, which is a lake in
Okay.
Nagano Prefecture in
Yeah,
Japan,
yeah,
and I took along a book with me, and the book was called Deep Ecology by George Sessions and Bill Duvall.
yeah. I
And
see.
I read that, and that was the book where suddenly, all these, I started making all these connections between, my love of nature, my love of hiking, and being active in the environmental movement. So
Mhm.
that was the book that really kind of set me up. And later, by the way, I did an interview with Bill Duvall when he came to Tokyo. I can't remember where it was published, but I did do an interview with him.
Okay. And
Mm.
what other kind of activities are you involved in outside? Well, the Friends of the Earth hikes and the your teaching duties and so forth. And by the way, about you are a professor. Is it your position, or you'd be a full professor? Are you?
Yeah, yeah, I'm a full professor. I have a PhD and I'm a full professor. Yeah.
And speaking of PhD, here's I want something that you have sent me with you and your family in England. And I know that
There
you
we are. That's us in England.
England. Is this when you went for your PhD?
Yeah, that was back in when was it? 1995, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's Lancaster, which is in the north of England. They have Lancaster University. And the reason I decided to go there was because at that time, they had, in my opinion, one of the best programs for environmental philosophy in the world. I
All
checked
right.
out quite a few different programs and I ended up going there, and that's where I worked on my PhD.
Okay. Great. Great. And so let's say in these picture of these four, they're your children, all your children.
Yeah, those are my kids, and that's my wife. Yeah.
You want to introduce them? Is that okay? Is that
Yeah, this is my yeah. If you start in the upper left-hand corner, that's my eldest son Ilya, and he and his wife just had a baby, Joe.
oh,
Yeah,
so
I didn't
uh,
tell you about this, but just about like I don't know 4 or 5 days ago.
oh, congratulations.
Yeah,
Is this the one you said his name is Joe?
his son's name is Joe.
His son's name is Joe. Okay.
Right. This is Ilya. His name is Ilya, and they just had a baby, and the baby's name is Joe.
Okay. So and that would be your grandson, right?
Yeah, my
Joe,
grandson.
Joe is your grandson, and
Right.
I think my grandson is also Joe.
Yeah, yeah,
Talk
yeah,
about
yeah.
that. Too many Joes around, but okay. And the one next to him on the right, who's that?
Yeah, the guy on the right, that's my second son, and his name's Kai. And he also has a little boy named Kei. And he's married
Okay,
to a Japanese woman. They live in Tokyo. Both Ilya lives in Kanagawa,
okay,
near the ocean, and
uh-huh.
Kai lives in downtown Tokyo with his wife
Okay,
and my other
all right.
grandson.
And who is this down on the
That's Hugh. That's Hugh. And Hugh lives, I don't know, about a 30-minute walk from where I live, maybe a little bit more.
Oh,
He lives really close, and he likes hiking too. He just climbed Mount Fuji this past summer, and
wow.
he's married to a Japanese woman too. He lives at the foot of Mount Takao. So if you know Tokyo, Takao is kind of a famous tourist
Okay,
mountain,
okay.
and in Tokyo, near Tokyo, and he lives at the foot of that.
And on to his right is
Yeah, and that's the youngest son. That's Len, and he's in Thailand right now.
okay, okay. All right.
Yeah, and he's had 3 children, so I've got three
Wow,
grandchildren from him.
wow,
Two grandsons and one granddaughter.
wow, wow. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
And uh, and this is your wife. That's
that's my
any
wife,
what is her
right?
name?
She's got an unusual name. It's
Echiko. I'm
Echiko
sorry.
in
Echiko.
Japanese, but she goes by the nickname Echo.
Echo. Okay.
Yeah, that's her nickname, right?
And you could you talk about how you met?
Well, she was a student in she was a student in the United States, an exchange student, and the very
Where was
first
she studying?
and at that time I was in Tennessee.
You were in
Um,
Tennessee. So she was at the University of Tennessee or someplace?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the same college. It was Milligan College in Tennessee, and she went there because, um, it was in Japanese they say honto inaka, which means it was like really in the countryside, and that's
Right.
really true.
Right.
She didn't want
Okay.
to go to a big city because she thought there'd just be a lot of other Japanese there.
Yeah.
But if she went to if she went to a place that was like way out, then she could be isolated. The only problem was there were about, I don't know, 10 or 15 other Japanese students there with exactly the same idea,
Can't
But
escape the Japanese. They're all over.
yeah,
So
but
what
we've
was she studying there?
she was studying psychology and human relations
Okay.
and later art. And
All
she
right.
eventually went on to East Tennessee State University and got an MFA in art.
Okay. Oh. And
Yeah.
where is she from in Japan? Is she from
She's from Aomori, which is
Aomori?
the northern part of the main
She's
island
a
of Japan.
Tohoku girl? I
Yeah,
didn't know that. Wow.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my God. Ah,
yeah, yeah.
wow. So, and Aomori City or where in Aomori?
The town is called Gonohe.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I know. Yeah, of
There's
course.
Hachinohe, which means like the eight, and it's number eight, right? And there's a
Yeah,
Ichini
Ichino-hei,
sign.
Nino-hei,
Yeah,
Samo-hei. Right.
yeah, and she's from number five, right? So
Okay.
go no hey, that's the name of her city.
That's a lovely area up there.
It is, yeah,
First of all,
and
the Tohoku people are wonderful people. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And
So
so, but get me, you. Where did you go to undergraduate school?
undergraduate school is in Tennessee. It was Milligan College.
You went to Tennessee from Ohio. You graduated high school in Ohio. Was that right?
Yeah,
Ohio.
yeah, yeah. In Ohio, then I went to Tennessee. And it was a
I
liberal
didn't
arts school. Yeah.
Okay. But then after Tennessee, you went to University of Chicago. Is that right?
Well, there was an interval. I when I graduated, I was working at a radio station for a couple of years,
Right, right.
and I wanted to get into media at the time, but fairly quickly I realized that there was no future for me in media, and I wasn't really into it.
Yeah.
So
Well, you have a
so
good radio voice.
well, yeah, I started off in the
Good voice
advertising.
for radio, at least, But
I started off in the advertising department, then later, small radio stations in America, you do everything. So I was a DJ, I was a news reporter, I was everything. But I got tired of it and then went back to graduate school at the University of Chicago.
okay.
And so that was the last city I lived in the United States before coming to Japan.
And in Tennessee, you majored in philosophy too, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. So
Yeah.
all right, good. And this is kind of a personal question that I don't know if you want to talk about this, but your children in Japanese they would be called half, and what would you
Right, right,
call them
right.
in English? Mixed, bicultural, bi-ethnic. How would we call that? I don't know if there's a
Yeah,
good name.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But
Yeah.
in Japanese, they would be called hafu, which
Hafu, right.
translates, for people who don't know that, it translates to half, like half
Half
Japanese.
breed.
Yeah, half breed. It's kind of
Right.
some people say it's a derogatory term, and some people are moving to change that. But did, as a parent, and for them, were there any difficulties because of their, let's just call it biculturalism for now, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
biracial or whatever you want to call it. But
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, it's not like a smooth process, but each of them developed their own, personal identities over time. Yeah, I won't associate them with any particular people, but the basic ideas that they were working through were right. The idea of maybe no identity, which is sort of like me. They don't strongly identify as American or Japanese, or they look at themselves as being both. So
Yeah.
instead of hafu, they say daburu, which means they're both.
double,
Right, which means they're both Japanese
not
and
half, but double. Okay.
right and American. So that's another alternative, right? Or they go on to one side or the other. They
Right.
identify more strongly with America or with Japan. Hugh, the little guy with the blue parka on. I just remember one time we were in America and he was talking to my mother and he was doing something. My mother said, "You're in America now. You're American. You have to act like American, right?" And my son said, "No, but I'm Japanese."
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
the problems are not just in Japan, the problems are also back home.
yeah. Because, well, as you know, my eldest son is living in America, and
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. You too. You got the same
so
situation,
yeah,
don't you?
well, yeah, and he's thinks of himself as an immigrant, so he doesn't feel, you know, totally American now. And yeah, but this is an interesting identity and so forth. I remember when my eldest was in elementary school, he came home from school one day and he asked me in Japanese, "Otosan, watashi nani jin desu ka?" Or
Yeah,
translated,
yeah, yeah,
"What
yeah,
am
yeah,
I?"
yeah,
And I
yeah.
said, "Anata wa
Yeah.
ninjin desu."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
For people
yeah.
who don't speak Japanese, ninjin is the word for carrot, but it's also a jin. The jin in ninjin is also the word in person. So anyway, you
Yeah.
got to
Oh, just
speak Japanese to appreciate that. But
one more story about that. The guy in the purple parka there, Len, when he went to university in America, and when he filled out his application form, they have a section on there like what's your race, He said,
yeah,
Dad, what's my race? Am I white or am I Asian?
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there was a little box there where you could check other, and I said
Other,
just
right?
just
Yeah, so,
just check other and
yeah,
then write
yeah.
human.
The otherness. Yeah.
You're the human
Okay.
human
Right.
race.
And you're also involved in well, let's to get some of the things that you're involved in. I think uh, you're in bowling. You sent me a
Yeah, bowling.
bowling, right? I have somewhere.
Yeah.
Uh, could you talk about that a bit? What is that all about? So you were bowling before you came to Japan, but
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, Ohio is bowling is kind of Fred Flintstone country. People like bowling, but New Jersey, where you're from, is even more
is
keen
it?
for bowl. Yeah, but New Jersey, that's where Brunswick is located.
Oh yeah, Brunswick, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
that's like they make what, the balls or something? What is it?
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. They make the balls and the alley. I don't know what they do,
Right,
but
yeah,
uh,
okay, right, yeah, I remember. Yeah, so and
the
New
bowling can.
Brunswick, right? New Brunswick. There's a New Brunswick, I think, but is there? Oh, is there I didn't know. That must be up north. This is like a different country up there, but
I don't know. When you pick up the bowling balls, it always says Brunswick on the outside.
right,
So
right,
I
right.
don't. Yeah, you're from New
Uh,
Jersey. You know better
Here
than
we go.
me.
I got this. Hold on a minute.
We got a bowling picture there.
I got a bowling picture. As a matter of fact, yeah. Uh, and here we go with the bowling. Okay,
Yeah,
so
there
let's
we
talk
are.
about this a little bit. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, that's our bowling group, right? Yeah, yeah, pretty mixed group.
And how did you get to know all these people? Are they are they like from your hiking group and they also do bowling, or what are they? They're not. They look. They're not. Are they students, or who are they?
Most of these people live in the neighborhood, and the story
Um,
behind this is kind of interesting because
okay.
there's a mountain near my house. It's called Compita, and it's that has a shrine on top that's connected with the main Compita shrine located in Shikoku in Japan.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah,
And then a few years ago, many years ago, 25, 30 years ago, there was a plan by a school to dynamite the mountain and build a sports complex on the site. So
uh-huh.
we made around the shrine, the people at the shrine, they made a Hantai group, which is, I don't know how you translate that. That's a,
Protester.
yeah, protest group, right? Against, dynamiting the mountain.
Okay,
And so I got involved with that because I live in the area. I live just
right.
a short distance from the mountain. I got
Right.
involved with that, and a lot of other foreigners got involved with that too. Plus, the
Okay.
Japanese were there. So we started our group, and to make a long story short, eventually we were successful a few years ago in taking the issue to court,
Yeah.
and I was actually in the court, which was fun. And the city government agreed to buy the mountain and to turn it into a city park.
Uh,
The shrine reverted then to our shrine association. So
uh,
I was involved with the shrine association. And then from that, all these people are gathering there, Japanese and foreigners alike are gathering there. Then we started to do other things together. We planned the bowling group. We have, like almost annual concerts. We have it's called a year-end concert. And we have picnics once a month on the mountain. So this group has kind of expanded. It's become kind of like a local neighborhood community group, and I think it's wonderful
yeah.
especially for foreign people living in Japan, to have the opportunity to form these kinds of groups and to make
Yeah.
friends and to.
Well, it must be good for you to get integrated more into the community. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
far more than that. But you use the word, just a little technical, you use the word shrine a couple times. And for our viewers who are not familiar so much with Japanese, the shrine would refer to a Shinto, would be the Shinto religion, the
Yeah,
shrine.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. There's a the Shinto religion has shrines, and in Buddhism they usually call it a temple.
Temple, right? Okay, all right, good. Okay, thank you. So let's see now. Where do we go? Oh, here we are. All right, and what am I doing here? What is stop sharing. I don't know what button am I supposed to push. All right. Anyway,
Yeah.
okay. And you have so many different things going on, but another thing I'd like you to talk about is this is how I got to know you in the
Oh, you got, where did you ever get that?
I just Googled it on and
I,
on
I didn't know it's on Google even.
this
Wow.
happens to be the one that had Sid Corman in it,
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah. Yeah.
just by chance. I wasn't actually looking for that, but what talk about Edge International Arts Interface?
Mm.
What is that? And you started it, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
what gave you the idea to start that?
Well, another thing that, I've been involved with, I'm a writer as well, and I write poems and short stories, and I just recently had a novel accepted for publication,
Hmm,
and a lot of I write mainly academic,
okay.
work, and
Yeah, I wanted to talk about your writing after this,
sure,
more depth.
yeah. Yeah,
Go
but
ahead.
the way this came about, there was a group in Tokyo that was meeting in Shinjuku in Tokyo. It was called the Tokyo English Literature Society.
Mhm.
And they had a monthly workshop where people go and you take your poems and stories, and then you read them and people comment on them.
Okay.
And out of that group, that group started a whole bunch of stuff. They had a magazine at that time that was called Printed Matter. They had regular poetry readings. They had art exhibitions. They had a whole number of they published books. They had a whole number of things going on. And then the magazine Printed Matter started to decline.
Mhm.
And as an alternative to that, then I started this magazine, Edge,
Okay.
and kept it going for about 2 years. I started in 1988 and finished up in 1991. We published 8 issues during that time.
Okay. For some reason, I thought it was going on a bit longer, but okay, 2 years.
No, no, eight issues for about 2 years. After that, then Printed Matter revived.
Okay.
And the way that I felt was, we don't need two literary magazines, so let them
Right.
let
Yeah.
them take it over. By the way, one of the things that I'm really proud about, right? I went all the way to Kyoto to meet Seamus Heaney, right?
Oh, really?
The
Yeah.
Irish poet who later won the
The
Nobel
Nobel Prize.
Prize.
Right. Yeah.
And I was bold enough to ask him if we could publish one of his poems in Edge, and he said yes. So I want
Wow.
everybody to know that we published Seamus Heaney in our magazine Edge before he won the Nobel Prize.
Okay. And typically, how many pages would this? I think I have a copy around here. I was going to look for it, but I forgot to look for it. But
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember, but it's I think it was 24.
yeah, it was a fairly thin, but
Yeah, yeah, fairly thin, right?
well produced and a nice cover, and the layout was right. Who did you do all this yourself, or were there?
The art editor was Stephen Forster, and he was one of the persons who later became the editor of Printed Matter. It's a long history, but later he became the editor of Printed Matter. But at that time, he was the art editor for Edge. Yeah, we did a lot of I did a lot of the layout myself, but he basically.
So in this what we're looking at on the screen here, this front this cover, you did the layout for that.
No, Stephen did the layout.
He did that. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
But the inside part, you did the layout.
Pardon me?
The inside the pages, you did the layout for those.
Yeah, we kind of worked together, but I did a lot of the basic layout, like just inputting, the text into the fields and things. Yeah. Then, that at that stage, it's all completely different now, but at that stage, you'd have to print it out and then you take it to a printer.
Right.
And then after they print it, by I don't know what is it, offset printing. I don't know what they use, but they would just print it, and it's kind of complicated. You have to deal with real photographs and
Right, right. Yeah.
do cropping and edging and all that kind of stuff.
It
So
must have cost some money to have this kind of glossy photos in there, right? I mean,
yeah, 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 yeah.
pretty.
I'm proud to say, we had about at the peak we had about 200 subscribers, which might not seem like a lot, but for small press publishing, that's okay.
Yeah,
And
sure.
and
Yeah.
we actually at the end when we finished it up, we actually made a profit, which is kind of unusual too. We had about $600 or 60,000 yen profit
Wow.
at the time that we finished it, which I donated to Japan Environment Monitor, which was another
Oh, gem.
uh,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
That was the
yeah,
kind of newspaper type.
right,
Uh,
right. Yeah.
place.
I'd written a lot of articles for them as well because it was connected with the environmental movement. So the leftover money I donated to Japan Environment Monitor.
So how many people were involved? You mentioned Stephen Forrester, but how many other people were involved with it?
Yeah, the poetry editor was Sherry Renaker, and she was amazing because she had contacts with all these, different poets.
Is she in Japan now still?
No, she's back in the United States now.
All right.
And Michael O'Rourke was the fiction editor, and he.
Okay.
Mm. So and one of the things that we did, we didn't just wait for submissions to come in. I mean, we went out and asked people
Right.
to
That's
submit
what I
things.
found, amazing, about, yeah, that, a lot of people, they typically, they just, wait for stuff to come in, but you
No,
get out there and ask for stuff, right? And
yeah, yeah.
search out writers and poets and so forth,
Yeah,
which
we,
is,
we we even heard about this really famous poet in Sendai named Scott Watson. We asked him to send us some stuff, and he did, and
never
we
heard of him,
published
never
it.
heard
And
of
yeah,
him. Okay. And, I was going about this, what was it? So yeah, and well, you said it was financed by. Did you have any advertisements in there? I forget.
no, 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 no,
No
no.
advertisements. So
It's
some
really
of it
hard to get
was,
advertisements, and
right,
we tried at one point to get some, what do you call it? I don't know, like a grant from companies or businesses. But when you get into that, it's like it's too time consuming and it's not worth it.
okay. All right.
So yeah, we
All right.
we we
Okay.
self funded it.
Oh, good. Good. And so you mentioned that you're writing and you're writing poetry, you're writing short stories and essays and so forth. And you mentioned this novel that you just had accepted for publication.
Mm.
Congratulations about that. And talked about that for a while, would you please?
Well, during coronavirus, I was doing classes on Zoom or doing them on demand, and it took a lot of time. I mean, it was almost the same as my regular teaching duties at the university, but I didn't have these long commutes. And in Tokyo, my commute is almost 2 hours from door to
Wow.
door, one way, right?
Uh-huh.
And so that's like 4 hours a day. And then I didn't have to do these commutes. And I didn't have enough time to concentrate on my academic writing. So I thought, well, why not go back and work on my creative writing. So I had a bunch of stories laying around, a bunch of poems. I just kind of collected them all and put them into like a book. And then I started to send them off to publishers. And then I also used that time to write a novel.
Okay.
And the title of the novel is One with the Father, One with the Father, which is a verse from the Bible
Right.
talking about Jesus being one with the Father. And then the subtitle is, right, a novel of mysticism, heresy, and rebellion in the Middle
Oh,
Ages.
right.
So
Okay.
the novel is basically set in medieval Europe, and it's most of these medieval stories are they involve the kings and the knights, but this is told from the point of view of the peasants.
Right. Right.
And it involves heresy because and the connection between heresy and peasant revolts and revolts against the systems. So it's kind of like before the Reformation,
Okay.
these kind of anarchist movements that were taking
Right.
place
Right.
among
Right.
the populace at the time,
Yeah.
to try to change the feudal hierarchical social system.
And
So
how many pages is this novel?
yeah, I don't know. Um, the formatting changes from time to time, but it's like about 160,000 words, which
Okay.
is pretty big for a novel. I mean, most
Is
novels
it
are.
your first novel?
Yeah, it'll be my first and probably my only. I don't have any plans to write any more
You don't have any
novels.
plans for it. And
No.
are you? This is to be published. So are you allowed to say where it's going to or when it's going to come out? Or
Well, the publisher is Whip and Stock, which is it's a religious publisher
okay,
and located in Oregon.
in Oregon.
And I haven't signed the contract yet, so everything is still kind of up in the air. But I can say, I've had contact with them, and and they've accepted it, and we're in the process of drawing up a contract right now. And then I suppose if everything goes well, the novel should come out in about a year.
Wow, oh, that's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is all. I have to stress that this is still tentative because we haven't actually signed the contract yet. But
well, let's see. You also have poetry, right? And I
yeah,
have some, some short poems of yours that I can share, and maybe you would like to read them. Would that be possible? Right?
yeah, okay.
While we're here,
Oh wow,
you see those?
yeah. How about just the top one?
Okay, all right.
Yeah, because I mean, to read them all is probably too much time. And the top one is the one that people seem to have the most trouble with. So maybe I can explain it a little bit.
Okay.
I wrote this is a collection, 4 poems about seeing. They were published in a journal called Soul Lit, right?
Okay.
Which is a journal of quote unquote spiritual poetry, but they're open to like all traditions. So when I submitted these, I said, these were written from the perspective of Zen, right, and Shinto, and also religious naturalism. So the first one is what I see becomes peripheral, resolved. No more will I while away vicarious hours. The horizon encircles me. Somehow the open air makes me think my eyes are getting larger.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I remember. I saw that too, and I also had a problem. I asked you what it means. What I see becomes peripheral. That, yeah, and yeah, I kind of like number 4. Why look for what has been with me all along? To be here alone myself is enough. Quite quite simple and strong impact. And yeah, very nice. Okay, thank you. And let me ask you this: in your thinking, what is poetry?
Listen, what I'm really interested in is silence. I got to show you something here.
Okay.
This is the book that I'm reading right now. Can you see the title here?
The philosophy of the unsayable. Yeah.
A Philosophy of the Unsayable by this guy William Frank, right? And he's amazing. He's got a background in philosophy and literature, interestingly,
Okay.
right? And also he talks a little bit about theology. But and this is what I'm really interested in, because how can poetry express experience? When you see a sunrise, you can say, I saw the sunrise and it was red, and you can talk about the colors or the warmth or whatever, right? But no matter what language you use, that can never convey the full experience of actually seeing a sunrise.
Right.
So I feel that the poetry, it's a step removed from the actual experience, and the actual experience itself is unsayable. And poetry is a finger that points to the experience. It's an icon. It's an icon.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But there are some people who would say that the poem itself.
Yeah.
Right. Just like if you're looking at a painting or something like that, that itself is interactive.
Sure.
Interactive experience. And
sure.
Yeah. But whether that directly represents, as you say, the sunrise or the sunset or whatever, that's another thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And, well, yeah, Matisse, the artist Matisse, he said, somebody criticized one of his paintings. It was called Woman or something, and they said, this doesn't look like a woman. And Matisse replied by saying, I don't paint women, I paint paintings.
Okay, right.
And that gets the idea across. And certainly, I mean, art and literature is in itself an experience. Yeah. And when you look at most abstract painting, and you look at a lot of my short stories, people have a hard time with my short stories too, because they don't make sense. They're kind of surrealistic and or irrealistic and fabulous, and they don't quite make sense. But Um, you can definitely get into the poem itself. A poem isn't what's the a poem isn't the poem doesn't mean but be. Who said that or something like
Uh,
that? Wallace
is
Stevens.
poem doesn't mean but is or something like
Yeah,
yeah.
something like that.
Well,
Yeah.
who cares who said it?
Yeah, but yeah, I mean certainly that can be an experience. But in my first poem about vicarious,
Mhm.
the word vicarious is used in that poem, and I feel that a lot of our experience is, we're caught up in this, vicarious experience that we get through the media, through this, social
Right.
networking, and
Yeah.
even through literature. I still do think there's a difference between, reading a novel and living your life. And living your life is something that we need to experience for ourselves. And
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I don't I don't want to.
Hopefully the novel or whatever literature, whatever you read, might feed into that experience, as
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
as
yeah.
you digest it, and it becomes part of your, but anyway, that's
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
get into
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know if but
Reading a novel can be an experience in itself, yeah, and you get really involved and wrapped up in the
yeah,
characters.
yeah,
But on the other side, how do you use that novel, or how does that relate back to your own direct experience of the world?
yeah,
And it's that direct experience, that's the direct experience that they're talking about in this book, and it's the direct experience I think that you have in Buddhism too. You know,
yeah,
Buddhism is not the finger, right? It's the
right,
finger pointing at the moon, and
right,
literature is like a finger that points.
right, right,
And sometimes, obviously, sometimes you look at the finger. That's true. You do look at the finger, right?
yeah,
But the idea is that ultimately you're looking at the moon.
yeah, exactly, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, 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 and well, I think you have you showed me once a collection of, I guess they would be called short stories, the butterfly dreams, or
Yeah, a butterfly's dream, right? Taken
yeah.
after
And
Chuang
what
Tzu.
is that butterfly? Where did you get that title? Is
Yeah, well, I mean that came from the Chinese philosopher Chuang Tzu,
and
who
who
was
is
a
that?
he was a Taoist philosopher.
Okay, right.
The most famous Taoist philosopher was Lao Tzu, and he wrote a book called the Tao Te Ching,
Yeah,
right?
or also known as the Tao Te Ching, but it depends on
Yeah,
which
yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah, 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 yeah,
which version of Chinese because they
yeah,
changed, right? And right,
yeah.
yeah, they
And
changed some time, and we had to adjust back to our pronunciation of the Chinese, right? Because
yeah,
well, the guy you're talking about, right, Zhuangzi, Zhuangzi used to be spelled Chua. AU do something like that, and but now it's a ZH, right? And
yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so yeah,
And
it's
I have Chinese students, and when they say it in the original Chinese, it sounds really different from anything that you and I can even try to do.
right, right, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
but
how did you? Well, you got in contact with this Zhuangzi through your philosophical studies or something,
yeah, actually, he wrote a book that was called The Inner Chapters. Chuang Tzu was a philosopher who came after Lao Tzu,
right?
and further developed Taoism. And when I was still in the United States, a friend of mine
Hmm.
gave me a copy of the translation of the Inner Chapters as a present.
Okay,
So that was my first encounter with that.
right.
And in the book, he has this. It's famous. I think a lot of people probably know this, but he has this famous passage where he says, "Last night, I was a man dreaming I was a butterfly,
Yeah, yeah,
and this morning, perhaps I'm a butterfly dreaming that I'm a man."
yeah, yeah. That's
So
probably the
I
best
I,
known.
I titled the book "A Butterfly's Dreams" because the stories themselves have a kind of dreamlike quality to them. As I mentioned, they're kind of surrealistic, or I think the word now that they would use is irrealistic or fabulous. So
Okay,
they're not the sort of thing that could take place in ordinary reality.
okay.
I've been inspired a lot by Franz Kafka, and
Yeah, yeah, that name rings a bell when I read this.
yeah,
Oh,
I woke up this morning and I was a cockroach.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
right,
he just describes what happens, and he doesn't give any rationale. You don't have this big scientific theory about how the DNA got changed because of mutations or something, right? It's just I woke up right this morning and I was a cockroach. And the idea of the style of writing is you tell the what, but
right,
you don't tell the why.
Okay.
And sometimes the what can be kind of unusual. And I'll have to admit, though, I am having a really hard time. I'm sending these stories out to various literary magazines. I'm having a very hard time getting them published
Uh-huh.
because very few people can see where this is coming from. And,
Uh,
the dominant view right now
yeah.
of at least most short story publishers is still pretty much realism and
Okay.
coherence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're writing something experimental that's trying to challenge those boundaries, you're not doing realism, and your stories are not coherent.
Right.
You're challenging that idea of coherence, that there has to be some kind of logical progression in the story. If you're challenging that, most people can't get into it. But the idea is you're presenting something that at least I look at as being iconic,
Right. Right.
which means, it's the symbol.
Right.
And that's what I'm actually writing about. And then the symbol is the finger that's pointing to something else.
Yeah. Well, Richard, we could go on talking about poetry and
Yeah,
literature
we could.
for hours, as we do when we meet in person. Uh, but
Yeah.
I wanted. We've got a minute left. Is there anything? What from here? What are your plans from now on?
My plans from now on. I've got 2 more years until I retire, and to tell you the truth, I can't wait.
Are you planning to ever move back to America?
No, 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 no. Yeah,
Uh,
I don't want to criticize America too much, but things work in Japan in a way they don't work in the United
yeah,
States.
yeah, I can see where that's coming from. Okay,
Yeah,
Richard,
yeah.
thank you very much for
Thank
being
you
here
so much,
today,
Scott. Okay.
time, and I'll be in touch with you later. Okay. I'm going to end the
Okay, good.
meeting.
Nice. Thanks talking to you,
Thank you,
Scott.
Thank
Right.
you, Richard. Nice talking to you. All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.